Hey folks, in this video we're going to check out how we can build the multi-chain indexing example project from scratch. Now this project here, what it does is it indexes transfers across the Kusama and the Polkadot blockchain all within one project. So let's see how we can do this. Jumping into VS Code, we'll go ahead and initialize our project with the standard subql init command. And we'll call this multi-chain demo. Let's choose the substrate network family. We'll choose the Polkadot starter project. And then we'll accept the defaults here. And then we'll cd into the actual folder itself. And let's jump into the first file, the schema.graphql, where we're going to decide the type of data we want to index. So let's delete this. And I'll jump into the example code here, open up the existing schema. And instead of deciding from scratch, I'm going to copy this and paste it into our code. Now what this is doing is we're actually indexing three types of entities. We've got the generic one, an account entity, and also a transfers entity as well. Now inside the transfers entity, we're indexing information such as the amount, the block number, the transaction hash, the network, and the to and from address. Now, this GraphQL schema contains a few relationships, as you can see. The from is actually of type account, which you can see defined up above, which further depends on another type called generic substrate account of generic substrate account. So there's a relationship between these three entities. Now, whether or not you need a relationship or not depends on your data model, but this example has one. Otherwise, you could have just put it all in one entity as well. Now, the next step here is to go ahead and customize the manifest file or the project.yaml file. Now, because it is a multi-chain project, we need one manifest file per chain. So what I'm going to do is rename this to Polkadot, and let's just do a quick check where we've got the chain ID, we've got the endpoints, the dictionary, that's all correct. And we're going to just delete the block handler and also the call handler because we don't need these. And I'm going to call this a handle Polkadot event handler. And it's going to filter on the balances module and the transfer method. And you'll see why I've named this Polkadot shortly. Now, as mentioned, we need one for each chain. So let me copy and paste this. And then I'll rename this and I'll call this Kusama. And I do need to change the chain ID. So let's go back to our code and I'll copy it from the actual Kusama manifest file here. This chain ID here, let's paste this in, DAF, and then I'm going to change the endpoint as well to a Kusama one. Let's delete the second one here, and then change the dictionary to Kusama. And the Polkadot event, I'm going to make this Kusama, and that should do it. Now, normally would go straight into the mapping file, but because it is a multi-chain project, I want to go into the Docker Compose file and make some minor changes here. Now, the first thing I want to do is actually define this as a Polkadot node. And I want to add in a few more commands, which if I jump into the GitHub repository, let's go to Docker Compose. You see I've got some commands here, which I'll copy in. So what I've got here is I'm actually using the F flag to point to the specific Polkadot manifest file. I've got a cache threshold set to 1. What this does is, for development purposes, it allows the results to come back a lot faster instead of being held in cache. I've turned on multi-chain. I've actually specified a database schema name of multi-transfer because the default is app or app. And then I've also disabled the historical feature as well. Now I do need to change this particular parameter node here, so let's call this Polkadot, like so. And that's all I need to do. But I do want to go ahead and copy this, and then just down below, I want to paste this in here because I want to call this my Kusama node. And let's make some minor changes here. And you can probably see why you want to start from a multi-chain template instead of changing this one by one. Change the port to avoid a port conflict, and that should be it. Now, what I do want to do is, let me copy the multi-transfer name here and change the GraphQL engine name parameter away from the default of app or app to multi-transfer. Okay, so the last piece of the puzzle is to jump into our mapping file, and let's delete all of this, and I'll copy over the code here one by one, explaining how it works. This first part here, we're just importing the various types, the objects that we're using, and then we've got two functions. We've got the handle Polkadot event. Remember, this was from the manifest file, this one here, line 36. And then we've got the Kusama one as well. So both of these, they actually point to the generic handle event, but it passes in the network name. And this is how we can capture the network that the data is coming from. After this, let's go and copy the actual handle event function itself. This is the main one. And what we're doing here is we are accepting a parameter name event of type substrate event. Along with the network, we then extract the addresses, the amounts. We do a small conversion from the address into a generic address. We also log some information into the console for debugging purposes. And then we've got a helper function called ensure account. And what this does, if we copy it over down here, I'll copy the second one as well, the ensure generic substrate address. All it does is it checks if the account is available. If it is, get it. Otherwise, instantiate a new object here of type account. And the ensure generic substrate address works in the same way. Now from here, let's go ahead and install the dependencies. Once that is done, let's go ahead and generate the types by running yarn code gen. But in a multi-chain project, this is slightly different because if I run this, I'm going to get an error saying it could not find the manifest file. So what I actually need to do is use the file flag and point this to one of the manifest files. It doesn't really matter which one, like so. And the reason why it doesn't matter is because in the manifest file, both of them actually point to the same schema file location. So that's why you can pick any one you want. So after this, let's go ahead and run yarn build and see if we get any errors. We get one error here, could not find the handle event. And that is because I haven't saved the file yet. So let me save the file, run build again. And now I get another error in my test folder. And that's because we don't have any test scripts. So I'm going to just comment this out for the time being. So let's just ignore this for now. And I'll rebuild this. And there we have it. We're done. Therefore, the final step in the process is to start the Docker container. You can see here I've got an invalid compose project in my Docker file. Let's go and double check this. This is the depends on. So we've got a dependency which I'll remove here just for development purposes. Let's run this again. And there we go. It's pulling the image down. While that's running in the background, let's load up our playground. And I'll go ahead and jump into the example query. This one here. Let's copy this, paste it in here and see if this works. And there you have it. We've got Polkadot returning. Let's go and see if Kusama works as well. and Kusama blocks are also returning. So there you have it, a simple multi-chain project created from scratch using the starter project as a template. But as recommended, if you are starting any multi-chain project example, go ahead and start from this particular template here, or at least you know how to build it from scratch.